Okay, so I have also added some readings that are not required. These just might be helpful for you for your ethnography. So these are all different options of what you could have as findings. Obviously, you are not limited to this list. These are just some things when I was brainstorming yesterday that I could come up with and say, okay, well, what might some students have as their findings for the ethnography?
So now that we did the last assignment, we did like the three cultures. So I don't know the culture, but there's like zero way that I can like get in contact with anybody about it. So that's just like
Correct. You have to be able to talk to people from that particular culture. So, yeah, sorry. But I think for your paper, you have to have like minimum 5 or 7 findings. So obviously you might not use everything in here, but it's going to be helpful for you to think of what kind of information am I going to look for before we go ahead and like write down our interview questions, which I have this sheet for, before we go and start and talk to our people. So this is under our pages list. So if you go into Canvas and go to pages, you view all pages, and then it's under readings, additional readings for the ethnography. Okay, Amy, we will see you later. I will make sure to get you on attendance. Obviously, I have not finished with this yet because I just started it yesterday. But if you're going to talk about food, these might be some articles that might be helpful for you to look at as you start to look into, okay, so how does culture and food interact? Okay, so this is an article. So what Americans can learn from other food cultures? Food is identity or is survival or is status. So that could be something that you talk about in regards to, food in the Japanese culture or whatever culture you pick. Are 4 reasons why food is the best way to understand culture. So how does it illustrate the history of this particular culture? Oh gosh, there we go. You could talk about language. So here's a couple different resources about language and culture. Music, social norms, and obviously I will keep filling this out, but start thinking about what you are going to be looking for. So when we spend more time talking about interviewing on Friday, that you can start thinking of some questions to ask whoever you end up interviewing. And you might already have some questions in mind. So let me grab. So do you want to toss around some interview question ideas first? Or do you want me to give you guys a brief overview of interviewing and then we can toss the question ideas around on Friday? I don't know, because I mean, it depends on how many questions you guys have about interviewing. And the ethnography is due in like April, Ramon. Are you gonna have that paper listed up on the pages or something so we can like either print it off or this one or which one? Oh yeah, I can definitely go and like type it up and put it in here afterwards. So I definitely don't mind that. I just have the paper copy so I can write it down when we were talking about it. Yeah, that's actually a good idea. Thank you. And that probably makes it easier on you guys too, because then you have. Yeah. Because then, yeah, I guess as we toss ideas around, you guys could just be typing up on your end as well. So, I mean, I guess I could just put it into here and say, here are some questions underneath these suggested readings. Yeah, let me just start out with kind of a brief interviewing thing. So I'm going to paste. So let me move this so you guys can actually see me. lecture mode behind, or not behind the lectern. Oh gosh. Okay, so please don't laugh at me, guys. Interviewing. So interviewing is simply the exchange of questions and answers. Penny, were you in my interviewing principles and practices class? Who am I thinking of? Maybe I think you guys were all just in like public speaking. Yeah, okay. But in this case, we are interviewing specifically looking at cultural traits and aspects of culture. So that makes it a little different than, let's say, like a job interview or something like that that you guys might be more familiar with. This will be a more journalistic style interview where you are asking on specific topics. So, you know, if one of our topics is going to be food, because that's number one at my list here. So someone give me a culture. Russian culture. Okay. So if I'm going to be asking, you know, a person from Russia about Russian food, I have to think, okay, what do I already know about the Russian culture? Well, what do I know about Russia? I know it's cold. I know it's a very large country, so I'm going to say, okay, are they part of a specific ethnic group in Russia? And then what do I want to actually know about their food? So one of the easiest ways to go about this is to say, okay, you know, like we do when we first get to know people, what is your favorite blank? So what is your favorite food? What is your favorite cultural food? You know, what is the most famous Russian food? What's the best food from your culture? What's the worst one? Sorry, there's like a cat fur in my mask again, and oh my gosh, it's just terrible. So favorite, best, worst, most famous. And there we already have 4 different questions that we can ask about food. We could ask about specific holiday foods. So in Russia, are there anything that they specifically make for Christmas or Easter? Do they make like an Easter lamb cake that's supposed to look like a baby lamb, but always ends up looking really wonky? I'm going to assume that most of you guys are going to be conducting your interviews virtually, correct? So some people, it looks like about a mix between. So it's different conducting your interview in person. So you said you're going to be doing yours, a couple people in person. So when you're conducting it in person, you need to make sure that your environment is appropriate. So you work at the stadium club. We're probably not going to conduct an interview at the stadium club because there's going to be music playing, there's going to be, you know, drunk people, there's going to be other distractions. So it's probably not just a good physical environment to conduct an interview in. So you have to say, okay, where can I physically go with this person to conduct this interview? The library might be a good option because you guys have the study rooms. You can close the door. You have a little bit of privacy. It'll be quiet. And then you can sit down there. And if you record it on your phone, you're not going to have a lot of background noise. You're not going to have dogs barking. You're not going to have children screaming in the background like it might if you're, you know, at home or somewhere out in public. So if you're doing it digitally, then if you're doing it over Zoom or Skype or something like that, Facebook, you need to make sure that you're also in a quiet place where you're not going to have lots of distractions so that the person can hear you. Or if you do it over email, or if you do a survey, then you don't really have those considerations. But if you do it over email, you need to make sure your questions are worded very specifically so that there is little room for miscommunication or misunderstanding. Is there anyone in here that would be interested in doing a survey format for your interview? Well, I will show you guys how to do that because it's actually really easy. Okay, so You guys all have access to Google through your student emails. If I can spell correctly, there we go. So if you go here to your Google Drive, you can go to New, and there's this thing called Google Forms. And it's really easy to create a survey or interview questions in this style. And then you can post it up on your Facebook or whatever, or email it out and say, okay, I have Czech Republic survey. So survey for intercultural communication about, Czech Republic culture. Then write the survey in that language or have a translator. If you speak good enough of that language, then, you can do it that way. But you can also just translate it after if you have someone who is available to do that, or an interpreter there with you. So like if you're talking to someone from China and you have your friend who also speaks Mandarin or Cantonese with you, who can live translate. But you can change the question type on here and say, okay, I probably want more written answers than just multiple choice. So I can say, okay, so if we're talking about food, so what is your, oh, that's a bad spelling, favorite food from the Czech Republic? So, and then they could type whatever they want in. Or you could even say, out of this list of famous Czech foods, which is, the most popular or whatever. And say, okay, well, there's goulash, or, kolache, or whatever else. And then you could send this out. You can post on your Facebook. There's not a question minimum for this. So it's just, what kind of information do you need from them? However, the downside to this is that you can't adapt as you go. So you can't say, okay, well, this is, they want to give a different answer than this. Okay, how do I adapt to that? Because, everything's written out. You're doing it asynchronously. You're doing it at different times. You're not sitting there with them. And when you can say, okay, well, what is your favorite food from the Czech Republic? Out of this list of famous Czech foods, which one do you think is, the most popular? And they're like, oh, well, the most popular one isn't there actually on the list or whatever. But this is an option, and then you can just say send, copy the link, and then post this on your Facebook and send it out, or send it to people through email. It's like, what else is on our list? So that was a very short thing about interviewing. I will talk a little bit more about it on Friday, and we will get some more ideas around. But do you guys have any questions, comments, concerns, thoughts with interviewing just after that super brief overview? Do you guys all have a pretty good idea of what your ethnography is going to be, like which culture?